Good evening. My name is Joe Sam Robinson, and it's my pleasure to have with us once again Dr. Buck Melton. Welcome, Buck.
Glad to be here.
You know, you look, what can I say, your appearance is sort of more of a tough guy, patina, like USMC there. Are you considering a military anything there? Or you had quite a story as to what happened?
Very straightforward. My usual hair person decided to retire without any warning, so when I went to get my usual haircut, I had to make do with the person next to him, and I said, you know, you've seen me go past all these years, so you know what my other person did, so can you do that for me, and just whatever you do, don't give me a crew cut. And
they
must not have heard the don't.
I think that makes a certain statement.
I'm sure what it states, but at least it will grow back.
No, that's good. So, that's a nice haircut. Thank you. Well, we had a lot to talk about in the world, and it's been a while since we've had occasion to speak on the air. But lots of things have happened, and one of the huge things, it would appear, that President Gay at Harvard has lost her job, and there's been an earthquake in academic circles, I would say.
Shortest presidential tenure ever at Harvard, right, by country mile. So,
right,
yes.
Lots of stuff going on, and it's at least it's supposed that there's something more to it than just her. What can I say? Her inability to function in that environment. Something more. And it's involved with all of education being involved, and I think I can get this right, equity, diversion, and inclusion. Did I get
diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Okay.
Which I think rather interestingly spells DEI, which is of course the Latin for God.
Yes.
So are we worshiping the new God of
well, I mean,
diversity?
Really, this is pretty impressive, isn't it? And this is really, I would say that in our society, over the past several years, really the last couple of years, those particular troika of words have really become quite dominant in many arrangements. And so much so that at least some people would suppose that education, the whole academic world, is more or less, they have another mission besides education, and that is to propagate those three words and to make our society better. And the defects of society are so overwhelming that having students getting good at calculus and forgetting these societal defects is not a good event, and that so educational institutions need to basically focus a huge amount of attention on that, and selecting students that presumably would benefit from this, and getting professors in that would share these opinions. And then right now, it sounds like there's some reevaluation going on. Do you have a comment, and then we can go?
Well, I think you perhaps overstate things a little bit.
That's not altogether a bad thing.
Trying
to discuss issues. But
well, I have been in some environments where things are every bit as you describe it.
Right.
But I do think that systemically we shouldn't dismiss it as such. I will take your own, shall we say, critiques of our judicial system and legal system in the past as a jumping off point.
Apparently that stung, but I'll let it.
Well, it didn't. It did sting, but I would just say I find a lot of your comments self-interested on that point.
Maybe
but
the right word is provocative. Maybe they're meant to be provocative. And
well,
from provocation comes insight.
Well, if all of your criticisms are such that would seem to benefit your interests, then I have to question the motives a little bit. But let's don't go down that road. I'm simply saying that for instance, you in the past have been very concerned that so many Supreme Court justices are drawn from your alma mater by chance, and that you yourself in the past have wanted to, have pushed for, shall we say, diversity on the bench. That that one thing you learn in higher education is that different people bring different perspectives and can shed more light on a problem. And I'll give you an example. Please pronounce very quickly, without any reflection, BASS.
BASS.
Yes.
Bass?
No, bass.
Bass?
You're a fisherman, I'm a musician. We have different perspectives on this.
Yes.
So some amount of diversity in a higher education setting, where in a multicultural society we can learn from each other things that we in our parochial views might not see. I do not see that as a bad thing.
Well, firstly, maybe I say being self-interested, possibly I'm self-interested in justice and truth, things like that. So if I push that, that's actually my motives. But that aside, I think that's an appropriate discussion to have with the way our society is careening to the right and to the left. And these three words, we might parse them out a bit, are sort of like in the Soviet Union, bread, land, and peace. That was a 1917 phrase, and the French Revolution, egality, equality, and fraternity. They were sort of like sort of the flag of the movement. And so there's kind of a movement that has those three words there. And if you scratch the surface, in my opinion, of contemporary power structure, those words emerge. And I'm not sure that everyone would totally agree with the way they're instituted. Now, the words themselves are rather harmless, I would say, or can be. Like bread is a pretty harmless word, and peace is a pretty harmless word, but fraternity is a pretty harmless word, unless there's a firing squad behind those words and a guillotine, and you're being pulled down the street in a guillotine.
It's context and not text.
It's context, which is another good thing to discuss. So the question is, what do those words really mean, and what do they really stand for, and is it appropriate to parse the words out? And I think we had sort of a quick little preliminary discussion about equity. And so I'm rather puzzled. It puzzles me as to why the word is in there in this troika. Equity, I mean, there's equity in a house. It's something to do, in my mind, vaguely with property, meaning the way I extract it is that if you're an American citizen, you have ownership in the country, and that if you don't, and you have economic rights that come to you as an American citizen, or one could say even an inhabitant. But I'm not sure why the word equity was put in there, and I think you come at in the discussion from another legal angle. Maybe.
Well, yes, and I mean, I think that you will find fertile ground for criticism without having to draw a legal analogy there. I think the legal analogy is incorrect. That equity has a fairly technical meaning now in the law. But let's look at the Latin roots, and your Latin is probably much better than mine. So
for our audience that are interested in this discussion,
take equity away, and let's look at the root.
Let's get right back to the
there.
Latin here. Right? Yes.
So fire away. So.
Well, I mean, you were going to discuss the Latin.
Your Latin is better than mine.
No, it's not. No, it's not. No,
but it's obviously the same root as equality or egalitarianism.
And it sort of appeared, I think, in common law, the courts of equity in the UK. I mean, it has Blackstone, all that stuff. It sort of it went through to the digestive tract of the legal system and has emerged.
It greatly predates Blackstone, but the reason why I say you have to be careful with it is for the same reason you have to be careful, and we'll take a slightly more familiar term. You have to be careful with the word malice. In the law, in criminal law, malice does not have the everyday garden variety meaning that it has in everyday lingo. It's got a very specific meaning, and if you try to draw parallels there, it may mess up what you're trying to accomplish. But I think it's still going to draw your fire If we talk about equity being fairness, and fairness when the rules themselves have not achieved a fair result, then we might have to proceed despite the rules to achieve a fair result. So
Well,
if you want to take that,
I won't ever kill it, but I mean, I think the idea is words can mean so many things. They have so many nuances. They change constantly, and if you say I want equity and you slam your fist down, and if I don't receive equity from you, I'm going to do something very bad to you. I mean, it becomes a very assaultive word in a way, even
Yes.
though its origins may have been in some peaceful legal chamber, possibly, but
Yes.
But the way it's used, it's pretty. I think it's the way I construe it is, I demand a share of the country. Equity means, look, this is my country. I want a share of it. I'm not getting my share. That would be the way I would see it. And then and then we can examine the other two words there. Do you have a comment on that?
Yes. Well, when you say I want my share, I think, I mean, if you're going to do that kind of glossing, you should go the full route and say, I want my fair share. And this is a phrase that politicians love to use. The Democratic Party, I take as an example, they would say all we want is for the rich corporations to pay their fair share. But they very rarely define exactly how much a fair share is.
Of course, fair is such a difficult, loaded,
Yes.
In a way, assaultive word. If someone says, well, I don't think that's fair, what does that mean? Well, it basically means my self-interest is being injured. If you really cut to the bottom,
it's
often fair
used
for
in
me
that regard,
because
so.
my self-interest is not by how I determine what is fair really comes down to what my part of the deal is.
Yes.
But-
And talking about that, that's what brings you to equity. I'll tell you the story of, I actually like to tell these two stories back to back because they really do give you two different views of things. That when Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. was still on the Massachusetts Supreme Court, and of course one of the great towering figures of American law, and this young whippersnapper attorney was making an impassioned argument before him, and Your Honor, justice demands that you rule in favor of my client, and fairness and equity are on my client's side, and so please rule for us in the name of justice. And Holmes anecdotally leaned over the bench and said, "This is a court of law, young man, not a court of justice."
It's
Now,
funny,
and
isn't
he
it?
actually did, that's probably never happened, but some of his other writings, he really did write things along that lines. Now, fast forward about 50 years to when Earl Warren became named Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court. And these attorneys in, for instance, civil rights cases would say, Your Honor, the law in this case is perfectly clear. This is 50 years of precedent. The law is absolutely on the side of my client.
Right.
And Warren would lean over the bench and say, yes, but is it fair? Is it right? And Holmes would have had an absolute stroke
Yes.
if he had heard a Chief Justice of the Supreme Court saying that. So.
Well, with this troika of words, fair is certainly underpins them, I would say that. But let's see, we have inclusion. That's part of the word, and so it means, I think, if you feel dispossessed and you want a place at the table, I want to be included in the power structure.
I was going to say power structure.
In other words, I want to be a big dog. I want, and I don't necessarily want to be included in the garbage detail or potato peel. I don't want to be included in people that are loading garbage. I'd like to be included in the power structure. I like my own airplane to fly around in. So it depends on what you want to be included in, and so presumably you get to pick and choose what you wish to be included in. Do you want to be included in the draft? Do you want to be included in many things? Do you want to be included in taxpayers? Do you want to be included? So, but I think the thrust of this word is inclusion in the power structure, and the other word would be diversity, which would say that and the assumption behind this is the way the country works is there are many millions of people that you could say don't have a place at the table, and a revolution may be necessary to give them that place. And the fundamental era of the structure of the country is the way that it's been put together, which would favor property owners and people of European descent that had been here for a long while, and that would be one reason they would have property. If they've been here a long time, they would tend to accumulate it. If you've just off the boat a little bit or crossing the Rio Grande, you wouldn't expect to have too much of that. So I don't know, I think we sort of ran around the bases in a rather ponderous way on these three words, and I will now redirect the conversation toward what seems to be going on in higher education, the amount of attention this concept has, which takes the oxygen out of traditional education arrangements. I mean, do you have thoughts about that? I know you've had experiences along these lines.
Well, once again, and I have experienced firsthand. I'm young enough to experience firsthand, I guess, the first big wave, or perhaps the second big wave of this sort of thing. A lot of not a lot, but some of my professors at the graduate level, bought very heavily into Marxism and the idea that the establishment is oppressive, and so I have seen some of that firsthand. And you're right. I don't like that. I disagree with it. It destroys academic freedom, among other things. But I'm not ready to throw out the whole concept. And I'm just looking at text. I'm taking the text at its word. I mean, if you if you want to throw in a context and say that these are code words for revolution, we can have that debate too. But just the idea of getting in different viewpoints. I remember my first week in law school. And the professor threw a question open for discussion, and 10 or 15 hands went up around this room.
And you were cowering in the back? No, he picked you?
I was well, halfway right. I was cowering, but I was cowering in the front. So I was used to sitting in the front at that point.
Right, a big mistake in law school, I think.
But yes, hearing these 10 or 15 perspectives from different people, from different ethnicities, from different socioeconomic backgrounds, shedding light on this one problem and thinking, gee, I never saw that, I never could have thought of that, where are they getting these brilliant ideas? I mean, that's what I think of as true diversity, that if you bring in these different personal histories, these different life stories, that you really can learn from each other and see different perspectives, and then presumably, and once again, staying away from the revolutionary context, presumably, as Milton once said, whoever knew truth to be put to the worse in a free and open encounter. So if that's what we mean by diversity, bring it on. Now, if you mean something more by it, then we can have that conversation as well. So.
I don't think that the way these three words are used, there's no seeking numerous opinions. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's the thrust of what's up there. Instead, it's kind of a revolutionary dialogue, and it's the way it appears to me.
Well, I'll give you an example of that, if I could jump in.
Yes, you may.
I'll give you an example of that too. Mary Daly, I don't know if she's still alive or not. She's certainly no longer teaching, but she taught at Boston College, I believe, a good Jesuit school, or it used to be. And she described herself very proudly, and she came to the fore in the 60s and 70s as a radical lesbian feminist. And all three of those words were crucially important to her. And she was well known at Boston College, which of course, like practically every college in this country, takes some government money. And in some of her courses, she would refuse to allow any men to register for the course. And she was saying, we are talking about the oppressions of the patriarchy here. Mm-hmm. I want my students to be able to open up. They feel threatened by the fact that men are in the room. And it took, and the school put up with it for some time. And finally, this happened probably in the late 80s. They said, look, we've got we've got, I think, was it Title IV, but we've got Civil Rights Act issues here. You can't do this. This is discriminatory. And she said, well, if you're going to make me have men in my classes, I'm going to resign. I'm going to retire. And they said, thank you, bye-bye. And she said, no, wait. And they said, too late, bye. But I think that's the type of context of the revolutionary, authoritarian kind of context that you're seeing. And yes, it exists. She is an object lesson.
Well, so. I mean, the context, you used a word that's it certainly appeared in the congressional hearing that provoked a lot of this discussion. Context is quite a loaded word itself. So we're having a lot of loaded words to pursue. I think one of the things is, in a way, if you accept these three words, they really, and I think this is what people object to, is a contrary opinion would be immoral to these opinions. And people would say, these opinions, or these three words, are there to correct extraordinary evil. And if you don't agree with this, then you're drinking out of the poison cup of societal evil that's wrecked the city on the hill. That's what's going on, and so we won't allow that. And a place like Harvard, just to say that, which prides itself on, at least in my day, on all kinds of free exchange. I mean, if any opinion is out there, people are very tolerant of getting different opinions. And,
although I would say in your day, I would say there was a significantly lower number of in the undergraduate population of Latinos, of Asian Americans, of African Americans, and probably of women as well.
Well, there were no women. That's true.
That was a Vassar.
They were at Radcliffe.
Yeah, Radcliffe. Excuse me. But yeah. So yeah, you got these amazing range of opinions from a bunch of fairly well-to-do white dudes.
Well,
is that true diversity?
Not totally. Not totally. I mean, there
was
an effort, but you know, I mean, that's maybe that's the point.
Mm-hmm.
If you really say, how are we an elitist school, whatever you want to call that, by its very nature, excludes people. And it propagates a status hierarchy that you could consider to be oppressive. And you could say, what's your life been like for the past 3 generations? Well, I've had this terrible life, and my parents had, grandparents, everybody's had a terrible life. Why is that? And it's the structure that's there, and it's the mechanism by which new I guess what would be the right word? Controllers or leaders or controllers get in their controlling position, and they go through this process. And so we have to destroy that process in order to make it a better world. And along with that, I think the purpose of the academic institution, maybe it's teaching calculus or really understanding Mayan ruins or whatever, or the sea temperature, or Shakespeare, or many issues, probing the boundary of knowledge with pursuing excellence in doing that has become sort of a secondary issue. One of the things that strikes me particularly is that in education in general, SAT scores are no longer mandatory, which is an extraordinary thing.
Well, the argument was that there was a bias towards middle and upper middle class whites in the exam, and therefore it wasn't a fair predictor of success in the new colleges.
Well,
I'm just telling you what they're saying.
I know that's the argument,
that,
and
so
I won't ever kill that. If you have someone that's doing brain surgery or flying a jet airplane or whatever, I mean, no matter what the process by which that person held the scalpel or the pilot's wheel, you'd want that to put the best person there. And if you stop any way that there can be any objective determination of that, it causes substantial problems. And I'll speak to this more, is traditionally in these elite schools, there were prep schools out there, and New England was loaded with them. And prep schools meant that if you wanted to go to such an institution, you would have to attend the prep school and learn a lot of Latin and Greek. And if you weren't good at Latin and Greek, you couldn't get in there, because each of the institutions had their own test, and they basically excluded really anyone else except from that social class. And then I think the SAT came in maybe in the late 20s. It sort of ginned itself up, and certainly in my day, the idea was that our net is out there and we're looking for someone that's, I don't know, is working in a dairy barn in Minnesota that just happens to, has tremendous intellectual ability, and we've discovered this person by the test. So the test itself was used as a discovery mechanism to put people, meritorious, worthy people in this position. And the fact that it no longer exists is a big problem.
Yes.
And I asked the question, if every test, if in fact every single test that's there, every academic test grades another thing that's going on at these institutions, are the number of A's given are over 80%. So you could presumably, if and of course the Supreme Court is restructuring this process, but you could just basically have tremendous character, which I don't dispute. That's a great thing to have. A great character and such a good, compelling life story that you could find admission to the place, and then you would not have had any kind of test to get there, and you would never have any test when you were there. And then after you'd done this, you'd continue along in your career, never having had a test until finally there is a time when that happens. And I've got stories about when that people finally hit the wall, and it's a terrible event.
Oh, and I concur completely, and this is a great concern of mine. Of course, the other side of that, just to look at the other side of that, Yale Law School is renowned for not giving grades. And the idea is if you were good enough to get in here, then it doesn't matter from here on out. But I take your point, and that does concern me. And that's the issue of grade inflation and everything else. But the flip side is, if the SAT was originally designed to find these Einsteins out there, then it didn't do a good job. It didn't do a very good job among minorities for about 40 years, if it came into the 20s. So, because there were still remarkably few persons of color or minorities or women who were darkening the doors of not just the elite universities, but essentially any traditional
That's
universities.
absolutely true.
So,
that's absolutely true.
So that sounds to me like a smokescreen. It's like we're out to find the best white talent we can get in this country, no matter from.
Well, is that fair? In other words, you have.
I'm looking at the demographics of the time.
You have just look at the Asian people. Asians are actually have higher everything. They're certainly they run around the track with Caucasians. They've done tremendously well with all kinds of disadvantages.
Then why wasn't Harvard mostly Asian in 1950?
There weren't so many Asians in the country. That's right.
I see.
I take your point. But I think if there were Asian people there, but did they take exams? Well, that's a good story to go back and look at that. But certainly now, that's one of the things that had an impact on the Supreme Court ruling. In fact, it was. And also your alma mater, UNC, they had a similar issue there. So there are people that have tremendous test scores, and they're not being let in because of their character flaws. Presumably the school thought they had character flaws. But the more of the thing is that there was a tilt to use a very loaded word, make the country a fairer place and make the power structure a fairer power structure by being more inclusive, get people in and on. We're going to do this and do that. The issue, though, is there a relationship between some of these testing events and actually what performance in the end? a lot of this, I can sort of accept the idea that if you somehow you're asking questions and your knowledge of Latin may be powerful, you've never had any Latin, on and on. On the other hand, mathematics would appear to me to be more of a culturally neutral event. And
that would seem to be as neutral as you could get.
And the mathematics part of it is you're not allowed to display your mathematical genius, which is it's a useful marker for your ability to function in our contemporary world.
Yes.
You could say, I like to think that God speaks in mathematics. So if you can understand and you're facile in mathematics, this gives you tremendous advantages, and society needs to find those people. And so if mathematical geniuses are being excluded, I'm overstating this, they're being excluded from their appropriate place at the table because of the defects in society's past, then that's a very a situation that's fraught with tensions and problems, and the way that it's being resolved, it doesn't appear to me that we're getting into an appropriate dialogue on that.
Well, I would like to think that most people, and I have met the militant exceptions to this, would not want to wholesale sacrifice all standards on the altar of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think that diversity is a good goal. I think it's an important goal, as long as it doesn't seriously compromise standards. Now, is there going to be perhaps some impact on that? Yes. I mean, I think back to Alan Bakke, who did not get. He didn't get into school, and people with lower grades than he did get into school. So it's a question of how far down that road we go, and how much we go in that direction. I agree with you. Nobody. I think no reasonable person would want to do that. Are there some ideologues out there who are trying to do it? Absolutely. The question is how many and how far are they going?
Well, thank you, Buck. Once again, a good interchange here. And,
thank you, sir.
Good to see you again. Take care.
This program is brought to you by the Georgia Neurosurgical Institute. For over 50 years, rendering neurosurgical care to patients of all social conditions, treating complicated problems involving the brain, spine, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves, endeavoring to encourage quality care, medical research, innovation, and education on a local, national, and international basis.